It's a clear, chilly January morning in 2010, and cameras are rolling at Turner Classic Movies. A small, elegant woman of exactly 100 years of age sits beneath soft lights, wearing a dignified smile. Her hair, once raven dark on vintage celluloid, is now silver white, framing a face still luminous with traces of old Hollywood glamour. That day, she's granting a rare on-camera interview. Poised, articulate, a living relic of an era most have only seen in black and white. It's a moment that feels nearly miraculous to those in the room, because Luise Rainer, born in 1910 and once the biggest female star on the MGM lot, has spent decades avoiding any public fuss. Yet here she is, recounting chapters of a life that began in war-torn Europe, soared to unimaginable heights of Hollywood stardom with back-to-back Oscars, and retreated into quiet domesticity for half a century, as though determined to vanish from the public eye. This final on-screen glimpse of her in her centenary year is a fitting coda to a career that flared briefly, burned fiercely, and then flickered out amid the shifting tides of the industry that both adored and betrayed her. To understand how she arrived at that reflective moment, you need to start in Dusseldorf, Germany, on January 12th, 1910. Born to a middle-class Jewish family at a time when Europe stood on the brink of cataclysm, Luise Rainer was a bright, spirited child who showed early signs of a performer's spark, putting on recitations for house guests or spontaneously dancing in the hallway. Yet no one around her guessed she would become one of the biggest Hollywood stars of the 1930s. That possibility emerged only after her father relocated the family to Vienna for business, and as a teenager, she discovered the stage. Just as many young girls dream of acting, Rainer pursued it with an otherworldly focus. She trained under the tutelage of Max Reinhardt, the legendary theater director known for shaping raw talent into dramatic finesse. Reinhardt saw in her a delicate intensity, an ability to shift from fragile innocence to fierce passion in the blink of an eye. By her early 20s, Luise was making a name for herself in German and Austrian stage circles, hailed by local critics as an ingenue with immense promise. But the 1930s cast a dark shadow. Adolf Hitler rose to power in Germany in 1933, and for Jewish artists like Luise Rainer, the future turned ominous. She'd begun small film roles in European productions, balancing them with stage commitments. Yet the suffocating presence of Nazism forced her to consider flight. In 1935, she made the leap to Hollywood, effectively escaping a regime that threatened her very existence. MGM quickly snatched her up, mesmerized by her porcelain features and emotive eyes. Yet to avoid fueling anti-German sentiment or acknowledging her Jewish identity, the studio concocted a new public persona, the Viennese star, implying her to be a purely Austrian import. It was a careful piece of marketing that conveniently erased her German Jewish heritage at a time when political controversy could scuttle a star's career. That rewriting of her life story haunted her. She'd fled actual danger, but in Hollywood she found herself in a new kind of captivity, the studio's protective lie. Later she discovered that any mention of her German roots or remarks critical of the Nazi regime put her at odds with MGM's desire to remain apolitical. She loathed it. She refused a role in The Great Waltz, 1938, because she sensed it was an attempt to romanticize an era of Austrian-German culture at a moment when Nazi aggression threatened Europe. The studio suit saw her refusal as ingratitude, labeling her difficult. In a sense, her moral stand, fleeing Germany, refusing pro-German roles, sparked the earliest cracks in her Hollywood standing. Despite these brewing tensions, Luise soared to unprecedented success in 1936 and 1937. It's almost impossible to imagine now how swiftly it happened. She arrived on the MGM lot around 1935 with modest English, overshadowed by established stars like Greta Garbo, Joan Crawford, and Norma Shearer. Then, in a stroke of brilliance, the studio cast her in The Great Ziegfeld, 1936, as Anna Held, the vivacious singer who famously enthralled Flo Ziegfeld. Rayner's subtle approach, emotional directness, refined technique made her more than just a cameo. She glowed. The film's highlight is a telephone scene in which her character, broken-hearted, congratulates her ex-husband on his new marriage. Her face conveys heartbreak and dignity in a single tearful flourish. Audiences were riveted. Critics raved about how she stole the entire picture with that one sequence. When Oscar night arrived, she triumphed as Best Actress. The next year, she starred in The Good Earth, 1937, an adaptation of Pearl S. Buck's novel about Chinese farmers' toils. Her role as Olan demanded a drastic departure from her glamorous MGM persona. She wore minimal makeup, learned stilted English lines to approximate an accent, and projected stoic endurance. The Academy responded with another Best Actress statuette, making her the first star to win top acting honors 2 years in a row. This distinction catapulted her from near unknown to Hollywood's new darling. She radiated a fragile, luminous presence that producers believed unstoppable. But unstoppable illusions have ways of fracturing. That same year, gossip circulated about her relationship with the charismatic composer George Gershwin. Gershwin, a major cultural figure, was in fragile health due to a then undetected brain tumor. Rayner's marriage to playwright Clifford Odets had just begun in February 1937, so if Gershwin's name popped up in her sphere, it implied scandal. Some claimed Gershwin wrote her love letters, perhaps indicating a deeper bond. He tragically died in July 1937 of the tumor. The timing overlapped suspiciously with the rocky start of her marriage to Odets. Though there's no ironclad proof, the rumor had enough traction to make headlines. Meanwhile, the Odets union was, by all accounts, an emotional roller coaster. He was a fiery intellectual, known for radical politics and moody intensity. She was delicate yet headstrong, wary of open conflict, but unafraid to speak her mind. They clashed incessantly. She discovered he'd once loved Frances Farmer, a fact that gnawed at her jealousy. He resented how her epic stardom eclipsed his fame. She found his cynicism suffocating. By 1940, they divorced bitterly, hurling accusations. She declared him emotionally cruel, while he labeled her far too fragile for real life. The press relished the meltdown. Rayner's squeaky clean image from the double Oscar wins was contradicted by this messy, short-lived marriage. It was her first major personal scandal, reminiscent of the illusions tarnishing. And it came at the worst possible moment, just as the Oscar curse loomed. That dreaded phrase, the Oscar curse, hit Rayner full force. After her second Academy Award in 1937, the studio believed they had a fail-proof star, yet she was already restless. She disliked many of the airy roles MGM assigned, particularly The Emperor's Candlesticks, 1937, which she found formulaic. Louis B. Mayer, head of MGM, famously lamented her emotive meltdown at the second Oscar acceptance, calling her hysterical, an adjective laced with misogyny. Rayner felt stifled. She strove for meaningful scripts or roles that resonated with her moral convictions, like resisting pro-German propaganda, MGM struggling to peddle glamorous fantasies amid the swirling politics of late 1930s Europe, deemed her uncooperative. The result? A string of box office duds. By 1938, the public no longer cared for her straightforward sincerity, overshadowed by glitz or new personalities rising. She demanded a release from her contract in 1940. The press framed it as Louise Rayner walks away from sure stardom. But inside the studios, hush-hush talk labeled her a diva, too intense or unmanageable. She left anyway, certain that her artistry required more freedom. Once free from MGM, she effectively vanished from Hollywood. In 1945, she married Robert Knittel, a publisher who offered her the stability she craved. They settled into a life that was the polar opposite of her celluloid frenzy, swapping mansions for a quiet home in Switzerland, then London, and eventually raising a daughter, Francesca. For decades, she refused film offers, only popping up occasionally on British television. The bright lights scramble no longer interested her. As if exiled by choice, she carved out a second act as a private citizen who read voraciously, painted, cherished her marriage, and watched the glitzy mayhem of Hollywood from a safe distance. Some interviewers tried coaxing her back into the spotlight in the 1950s or 60s, but she politely declined. The meltdown of her relationship with MGM had taught her caution. An industry that once crowned her queen had proven fickle. Once you fall from grace or run afoul of the system's illusions, the machine hardly weeps. Yet an unexpected cameo arrived in 1997, a minuscule role in The Gambler. She was almost 87 by then, signing on less from a yearning for stardom than from a whimsical curiosity, maybe a quiet farewell to the medium that had once deified her. People on set described her as spry, gently regal, still possessing that intangible aura of old Hollywood. She gave her lines softly, then retreated to a corner to read or chat with younger cast members who marveled that she'd started acting before they were born. The film never caused a sensation, but to those who recognized her name in the credits, it felt like glimpsing a ghost from the 1930s stepping momentarily into modern times. That fleeting return preceded a long silence. She continued living quietly with her husband until he passed in 1989, then carried on alone, traveling between London and occasional European getaways. The big moment of public reemergence was in 2010 on her 100th birthday, a milestone almost no star from her era reached. Turner Classic Movies courted her for a special interview to commemorate the 70-odd years since her first Oscar. She agreed, surprising fans who assumed her either uninterested or infirm. The televised chat proved riveting. Her voice might have weakened, but her wit had not. She recounted with a disarming directness how the studio wanted me to be something I was not, or how I never wanted fame. It came so quickly I didn't know what to do with it. She joked about how winning 2 Oscars in a row seemed like an accident. The anchor steered the talk toward gossip, like her alleged affair with Gershwin or her feud with Louis B. Mayer, but she downplayed them with tact, neither confirming nor denying. The broadcast lit up social media, or what passed for it in 2010, with film buffs rediscovering a star who'd beaten the Oscar curse in longevity, if not in career continuity. She was a living historical artifact, bridging the apex of studio-era illusions and a modern world that recognized the toll behind them. By late 2014, at age 104, Rayner's health finally began to fail. She'd never quite shaken the habit of occasional cigarettes. Some said she liked a single puff in the evenings, and the harsh winter in London wore her down. A mild flu turned into severe respiratory complications, and though family and caretakers rushed her to St. George's Hospital, her frail body couldn't rally. On December 30th, 2014, in the hush of her London flat, she slipped away in her sleep. News outlets around the globe carried brief obituaries. Luise Rayner, first actress to win consecutive Oscars, dead at 104. The tributes marveled at her longevity, her once famous flair, and her near-mythic seclusion. Cinematic fans who knew the old stories recognized that the rebellious star who had defied MGM had outlived almost everyone from her era. She left behind her daughter, Francesca, along with a smattering of personal artifacts that would soon surface in estate sales. Among them were mementos from her MGM days, diaries she'd kept sporadically, and, most symbolically, one of her Oscars, which later sold at auction for $500,000. The swirl of interest in that trophy ironically outstripped the coverage of her passing, a final commentary on the ephemeral nature of star worship. A private farewell took place on January 5, 2015, in a discreet ceremony at Golders Green Crematorium. The small group who attended included some family, a handful of close friends, possibly a few film historians. No major Hollywood tribute, no official star-studded memorial. That suited her. She'd chosen to scatter her ashes in Hyde Park, a quiet corner near the Serpentine, ensuring that her final departure was understated and free from the spectacle she once found so stifling. If that felt anticlimactic for a woman who had once bested Garbo and Shearer at the Oscars, well, it was precisely the note she'd insisted on. Yet her legacy, ironically, began to revive after her death. Modern film scholars recognize the uniqueness of her consecutive Oscar wins, only done by a handful of performers across cinematic history, including Spencer Tracy, Tom Hanks, and later Katharine Hepburn, though not consecutively in Hepburn's case. Rayner was the first, and those two roles, Anna Held in The Great Ziegfeld and Olan in The Good Earth, demonstrated her incredible range, from a flamboyant French performer to a stoic Chinese peasant. Younger generations of critics noted that had she arrived a decade later, she might have thrived in post-war cinema's penchant for psychological realism. Instead, she collided with the studio era's constraints, the forced illusions, the rewriting of her biography to mask her Jewish-German roots, and the political tension that accompanied refusal to do pro-German pictures. She was essentially too authentic, too restless, and too morally upright to thrive in a system that prized compliance. And that's Luise Rayner's story, an actress who soared into the stratosphere of Hollywood's 1930s pantheon, gleaned every accolade possible, then walked away to reclaim her authenticity. The swirl of controversies, her rumored diva meltdown, her tensions with MGM, the hush-hush Gershwin connection, the Germany fiasco, none overshadow the quieter truth. She was an artist who refused to let the industry define her. She escaped real Nazi horrors, only to confront a different brand of tyranny in the studio system. She responded with dignity, forging a life that ironically proved longer and more peaceful than almost any other major star of her time. And across the decades, her name might not ring as loudly as Davis or Hepburn, but for those who delve into the deeper annals of film history, the mesmerizing glow of her earliest roles remains. She remains the woman who, for a fleeting moment in the mid-1930s, captured Hollywood's heart, pinned down 2 consecutive Oscars with effortless grace, then chose to exit the stage and quietly live on for another 70 years, far from the frantic glare of cameras. That in itself might be her ultimate performance, refusing to be devoured by the illusions she once commanded.